Hi, in this lecture we are going to talk about blind SQL injections. So in some cases you can inject in a query, but you will never see the result. That's why it's called blind, because we don't see the result. So extracting data from the database, it's not as trivial as it was with the union select. So we have to find another way how we could get out data from the database without actually seeing the result. To do that, we have to somehow create queries which either return true or false. It's up to us how we define what means true and what means false. The goal is to make this definition and then tailor a query to that it will return true or false depending on the question what we ask. And when we have that, we can start asking questions like, is the first letter of the user is A? And then if the query returns false, then we continue that. Is the first letter of the user B? And when it's false, then we continue. And at some point when it says it's true, then we know the first letter of the current user. Now that's pretty high level this way. So let's look at an example. I go back to burp and get back to my original request. And if you check the help of the API PHP, it says that there is a parameter called count only, and if it's one, then it only returns the number of results, so not really the data. So if we say here count only one and go, and then we just got the count of the post titles, which is 4. So this is now a blind injection because we can still inject SQL through the title, but we don't really get the data we were requesting, so we just cannot extract the data so easily. Of course, this is just an exercise because we make it more difficult for us deliberately, so we don't have to use here blind injection, but in many cases that's not an option to get the data or not, it's just blind, so it makes sense to learn how it works. So as I said, first we have to define what means true and what means false. So the original request returns the number 4. So let's say that's what we are going to consider true if we get the number 4. And 0 will mean false. So whenever we get 0, we get false. And now we have to create a condition which will return true or false depending on the question what we ask. So let's try to figure out the current username, database username, what we talked about earlier. To do that, we start the injection as before, %, and then adding the additional condition, which will be an AND, because our goal is that if this injected condition returns true, then the result of the whole query is true, and if it's false, then the result of the whole query is false. First, I use the S key. I will just type it in and I'll explain what it means. Substring user equals 97. And then I finish up the query here with semicolon dash space. Now I wanted to first type it in because we have to start from the middle. So we want to find out the username. We get that with the user function. But we will ask always for one letter because we are just guessing and the query will tell us whether it's true or false. To do that, we have to take the first letter of the username. We do that with the substring and from the first letter until the first letter. So that's how we get the first letter. And then with the ASCII function, we get the number, the ASCII code of this first letter, and we test it against 97. 97 is the lowercase a. So if you go to an ASCII table, then you will see that A is decimal 97. That's why we are comparing it to 97. So basically with this query, we are asking a question: is the first letter of the username A? So let's try it. And it returns 0, which we said that's the false. So it's not true. Because what happens is that it's not A, so it's not equals to 97. So this condition is false. And because it was with an AND, the whole condition is going to be false. So it returns 0. Now we can continue with 98 to test whether it's B. It's also not B. So we can keep going like that, but I would rather show you how to automate it with intruder. So send the request to the intruder. Yes. Go to positions, clear, and we'll only, actually I changed this to back to 97. And we're gonna only work with this one. So I select this one as an injection point. And in a payload, I say I want numbers from 97 to, let's go to the table, and we're just gonna test the lowercase letters, so until 122. 122, step is 1. You see the 26 request will be sent, and here we just, to the fraction digits, I say 0, 0, so that we always use integers. And we go to options, and I will add a grep match. I will clear this one. Yes, and I want just one requirement, that it contains the air quotes for, because that's when the response is for us means true. All right, and let's start the attack. Okay. And it is running. So these are the ASCII characters tested. And it's running. And there is one result here, 114. You could see in the response, it returned 4. And there is nothing else. So 114, let's go back to our ASCII table, is R. All right, so now we know that the first letter of the username is R. Now let's try the second letter. For that, we have to change here in the substring the starting and the ending character to 2 and 2. Otherwise, the attack is the same. So just start attack. And there is a hit. It's 111. Again, it returned 4. Let's check what's 111. It's O. Now you could keep going. Of course, we already know that the username is root. We have seen it in the previous lecture. And that also shows that our attack actually works. So we found out the first 2 letters of the current username, which was root. But even this one, when we have so much return data, is still kind of a lucky situation, because we still get something back. But in some cases, you don't get anything back from the application, because it uses your input in a query, what it only uses in some kind of calculations. So it queries the database, gets the data back, it calculates something, and then you never see the output in any ways. So then we have to find another way how to figure out whether our query was successful or not, and what's true or false. So the best way to do that is doing a time-based attack. So in this case, we are going to define true, that the response will have a long delay, and false if the response doesn't have a long delay. So we have to now construct our query to somehow include a delay. So I will just delete this one and back until this. So I will do a union select. But only because I want to do an if function, which can be done in a select. And I will type it in and then I explain what that is. So our condition here is that if the first letter of the username, this is the username, this is the first letter, and then this is the first letter in ASCII, is 97, so it's A, then we sleep for 5 seconds. If it's not A, then we don't sleep. With that, we basically could build in a condition which either sleeps or not. So let's try it. You could see that the response time was 27 milliseconds, so it was pretty quick. So it's not 97. So let's try with 98. Now 24 milliseconds. Now we already know that the first letter is R, so it's 114. Let's try that. And we are waiting. And you could see it was exactly 5 seconds and 27 milliseconds. So it was true that the first letter is 114, which is the letter R. So we could base on our guesses on the delay. Now you can dump the whole database with time-based blind SQL injection. Just it's gonna take some time and it's pretty complicated to automate it. For instance, we can hardly do the same attack what we did in the repeater in the intruder with the time-based attacks because we have to specify how we decide true or false. Now, different databases have different syntax. So we tested MySQL now, but the point is to understand the concept of these attacks because whenever you find a SQL injection, it will depend on the query, what's used by the application. It will depend on the database system, what's in use, and also on your creativity, how you're going to exploit it. So the point is that you know your possibilities. There are lots of SQL injection cheat sheets in the internet, which I also use all the time. So whenever you find some kind of vulnerability like this, you can just search for a cheat sheet and try to figure out how these kind of attacks would work in that environment or in that situation. All right, in the next lecture, we are going to talk about automation because as you could see, these blind injections are pretty difficult to dump a lot of data without automation. So we will see that in the next lecture. See you there.